have been by staff members multiple times at all of these facilities. They're torture centers for children, is what they are. In my last program, they would give us physical consequences, which were insane. Hi, my name is Paris. When I went back to my boarding school for the second year that I was there, which was 8th grade, I had started dating a girl in the school who was one of the English teacher's daughters. One day I came to school and my girlfriend just wasn't there. Like, she was gone. A few months later, she died in a car accident. It was devastating. It was the first time anyone I'd ever known that was close to me had passed away. After a couple of weeks of me just really not doing well, they sent me actually first to stay with a teacher, which I didn't know really what was happening. I kept asking. I was like, hey, how long am I going to be at this teacher's place? Because after a few days, I was like, okay, let me try to see if I can go to class. And, they were offering me therapy and stuff. So I was like, okay, let me talk to a counselor. But they wouldn't tell me how long I was going to stay at the teacher's house. I messaged one of my friends and I was like, can you please call my mom? Can you please call my mom and ask her what's happening or when I'm going back to school? Because my mom wasn't even calling me. She was like, yeah, I'll call your mom. And then I go to sleep. Maybe a few hours later, in the middle of the night, I wake up and there's two strangers in the room. The room is dark and all they say is, do you want to do this the easy way or the hard way? Do what? What are you talking about? Then next thing you know, I'm being dragged out of my teacher's house and I'm shoved into a van. We're gone. It was so confusing. They grabbed me and they put me in zip ties, forward facing. And then I was sitting like this until we got to the airport. They took the ties off to get me through the airport. I've been to 3 separate facilities. The first one was a wilderness camp in North Carolina. The second one was a residential treatment center in Utah. And the third one was a lockdown facility in Tennessee. The people who work in these places are often very abusive towards children. I have been by staff members multiple times at all of these facilities. They're torture centers for children, is what they are. They're putting kids in restraint beds. They're locking kids in solitary confinement. I myself was locked in solitary confinement for hours and hours and hours multiple times. The second time I was transported was between program 2 and 3. The facility in Tennessee was like a lockdown facility, so it was similar but worse in the sense that when the transporters dropped me off, they dropped me off to a locked unit. I was put behind a metal door, it locked behind me, and then I did not come back out for probably a couple of months before I was allowed to be outside. When you first get there, you are not allowed to interact with anybody. You are on what's called solo. The reason they tell you that they do it is so that you can find yourself or whatever, no. The reason they actually do it is because they want to get in your head. They want you to not have anyone that you can talk to. They want you to see this group away from you that's doing everything that you're not allowed to do. They want you to see these kids having fun with each other, even though they're not having fun. They want you to see these kids working and doing the things they're supposed to do so that later, when you get brought to the group, you don't ask any questions. You don't see people in the group talking to each other, gossiping, going, oh, what's happening to me? What's happening to me? You see kids working like animals. You're watching kids your age be abused and tortured and treated horribly for probably about a week. And then they finally look at you and they go, okay, come on, now it's your turn. And the last thing you're going to do after being alone for a week is complain. You're going to acclimate. It's like a psychological torture thing. I was 13. The youngest person was 11. The eldest was 18. We were given two tarps. One was a clear tarp and one was a blue tarp. You could sleep on the ground of the forest with the clear tarp, with the plastic one. And then with the blue tarp, you could take some rocks and you could form an A-frame tent. And you could make some cord using tree bark. And then you could, if you made enough rope, then you could pitch yourself a tent. They didn't help you do that, and they didn't give you a tent. So it was like, here's your tarp, here's your backpack, figure it out. They would keep us so confused that you didn't even know what time of day it was. In all three programs that I went to, the therapy is the same. It's group therapy, and you're usually sitting in a big circle. It's attack therapy. Basically what they do is they say to you, hey, Paris, today we noticed that you did this thing. This thing is really bad. So everyone in the circle, why don't we go around and tell Paris exactly why this thing she did was so bad and why it makes her such a bad, sick, unhealthy person. What's the punishment that Paris deserves then? One of their favorites was to do a halt, which was stand and stare at a tree and stand completely still, do like a 10-minute halt. So you have to stand there completely still and you stare at the tree. And if you move in any way, if you cough, if your eyes move, if you scratch, if you change anything, start over. You'll stand there for 8 hours. You'll get right to the end, like 1 second away, and they'll go, no, she moved, I saw her move, start over. In my last program, they would give us physical consequences, which were insane. There was this girl at my last program, they made her be on touch with a wheelbarrow of sand, just hundreds of pounds, full wheelbarrow of sand. And every time she would do something right, they would take a small cup out and they would pour it out. But then every time she did something bad, they would take sand and they would just put it in this wheelbarrow. And for months, she had to walk around with this wheelbarrow of sand. Just crazy little things like that. It was a rule that you had to have your shirt tucked in, and my shirt was untucked. So I stood up to untuck my shirt, but it was also a rule that we weren't allowed to stand up. So because I stood up, they knocked me to the ground and then me up with and then next thing you know, I'm in a restraint bed net. They just leave you there. Like they just leave you there drooling just however long they want to. I know for sure they weren't supposed to like slap us and hit us and stuff, but they did. There was a lot of sex at night from the staff members. The program director of my last program, I was on the ground and I was refusing to move because they were putting us on work duty again. It was like chopping wood for hours and hours and hours, and I wasn't feeling well and I didn't want to do it. So I was like sitting on the ground and I didn't want to move. And he came up to me and he grabbed me by my hair and like pulled my head back, just like pulled it back because I wouldn't look at him. I was looking at the ground and he like made me look into his eyes and he was like, are you gonna go now? And then he like pushed me like down onto the ground. Another staff member saw it happen, and they were a newer staff member who was like not used to seeing this stuff, and they actually reported it. They reported to someone. And someone came to talk to me and I thought they were there to help me. But so I told them everything. I was like, we're being abused, like we're being touched, like we're being hurt, like we're being treated so horribly. And then I found out that person worked for the program. They told the program director that I had said all of these lies. Somehow they called my mother and they convinced my mother that I needed to apologize. And so next thing you know, I'm like sitting with my therapist and with the program director, and my mother's on the phone, and they're forcing me to say sorry to this man. It was insane. In wilderness, you could not shower. I did not shower for 97 days. That's how long I was at wilderness. And it took days and days and days and days to get the dirt off of my body. I had built up permadirt. Like on, that's what we called it. We called it permadirt. I had built up permadirt like on my fingers, on my hands, like the calloused skin. Like it took like several weeks of like exfoliating to like not look like I worked in a coal mine. There were lots of sick kids there that weren't getting medical attention. It was awful in that sense. It was incredibly difficult when I first got out because my family didn't send me immediately back to boarding school. They did something much worse. They sent me actually immediately to France, to school in France, at a place that I didn't know anyone. Literally 2 days after getting out of the last facility, I'm 16 years old and I'm on a plane to Paris. When I got there, I saw my mother for 2 days and then she dropped me off with these people. I wound up in southern France for a few months, and then I wound up in South Africa in school there for about 6 months, also with kids that I didn't know, that I didn't know anyone, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. And then finally back to my performing arts boarding school. And once I was back in that school, it was just, perform, 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 perform. Sorry, when I got back to my regular school when I was 16, I started seeing a therapist. That helped a little bit, but to be honest, the thing that kind of helped the most was finally getting the validation of other people coming forward and sharing their experiences, because it finally made me realize that finally people will believe me. Because all of this stuff is so crazy that, when this was happening to me, the first program I went into, it was in 2008. In 2008, no one was really talking online in the way they are now about their experiences. No one believed me. Like, everyone thought I was crazy. If I tried to talk about this stuff when I was first getting out, people thought I was making it up. Even therapists. That changed my brain completely from being someone who felt victimized by this industry to someone who suddenly felt like maybe I could destroy it. Yeah, in my experience, what they me up with the one time that they injected me was which I don't know exactly what, I'm not a doctor, but that was the name of the medication. I actually had an adverse reaction to it. It caused me to start cogwheeling, which is like when your head starts moving without you're not trying to move, but your body's moving. And it got so severe that my head kept moving back. Like I was like all the way like this, and my head was trying to as if my head was trying to touch my feet. And it was the scariest thing in the entire world. So when that happened to me, they had to me up with more medication. They had to give me something called to reverse the reaction from the house. I saw kids in states that no kid should be left in due to their medication. I've seen kids not able to sit up. I've seen kids just kind of nodding out. I guess I just want to say mostly to the young kids that are stuck in these facilities now, I want these kids to understand that there are adults who see you, who understand what you are going through, who will believe you and will fight for you. When you're stuck in these situations, you're basically programmed to believe that nobody is there for you and no one will believe you and no one will understand you. So really the one thing I want to say is to the young kids out there who are struggling with this stuff, who are either in and out of these programs right now or have been in one of these programs recently, and you're still a kid and you don't know what's happening and you can't figure it out, we will fight for you, is what I want to say.